Coming up, all eyes are on the Arizona Cardinals as we give our final preview for week 2 for Big Blue. Predictions, betting lines, odds, takeaways, fears, dominant things that we think are going to happen. And also, what have we learned as we follow up on Thursday Night Football and the early sample size for many contending teams this NFL season? Yes, sir. It is OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where, as you know, we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast with Doug Norrie and your New Jersey Devils rookie camp underway on the Devils Puck Luck podcast with Danny McDonough. Joined, as always, by the healthy, the wealthy, the wise, the generational ticket holder, the pulse of the people, Mr. Andrew Mackwitz. How are we, sir?
Nervous, excited, worried. Ready to get back on track. I don't know. I have a whole, I'm in a glass case of emotion right now, Adam. I don't know what to think going into Sunday, but there's a lot of emotions going on.
I was going to say, that's just how you feel going to lunch today with your wife. But then there's the football to think about. There's a lot on the table here as we kick off the weekend. Yeah, I think it's funny, man. We're going to get into, obviously, some of the things that maybe we feel like the Giants can very comfortably accomplish against the Cardinals, maybe a potential fear. Hey, yes, it's probably going to be related to the offensive line. But before we get to that, Thursday Night Football, where you and I both, we said, we're doing the pick 'em. We pick Thursday nights, pick Monday nights. We do some random polls as well. 6.5? 6.5 points, Andy. Of course you're going to lay that with the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Minnesota Vikings at home. It's like Vegas knows, Andy. It's like they know.
Adam, right before DeAndre Swift scored in the game with about 4 minutes to go, the Minnesota Vikings were down 6 points, which was right around the exact spread, and it was at the exact over-under on what the game needed to be. So if the Eagles ran out the clock, it was literally the exact game script that Vegas thought was going to happen. So I guess they submitted it on time, even though this was a short week in terms of what the script should be. And for the most part, the teams followed through, right?
Yeah, listen, it's not unlike soap operas, right? The great daytime dramas. Listen, it's a quick turnaround, but if you want to get those narratives out there, you got to get it down on paper. And luckily they did. And unluckily for us, it did not work out. So we will update. I think after this weekend, we'll come back in and it's not going to be pretty. We'll update where our current season picks have gone. They've not been great. We both took the L with the Giants in week 1, as I think a lot of people would have. We've missed a bit on some of our Thursday picks. So we'll get to there, though. Although I do think we did a pretty good job from the betting standpoint with some fantasy ideas and things like that. So we'll get into that a little bit later. When we turn our attention fully, though, onto the New York Football Giants and onto the Arizona Cardinals, you see it right there. It's the game preview. We'll talk about biggest fear and bullish take, but where do you stand? You mentioned trepidation, fear, concern. We don't know what to think about it. I have turned the page from the Dallas Cowboys game. I have reset my mind, and now I look at the schedule, and I look at the Arizona Cardinals, and I think about the way I felt about the Giants every single moment before the kickoff of the Dallas game, and even the first drive of the Dallas game, 99% of it. And I go, yeah, easy. This is a 10-point win. This is a team that's up 23-10 in the fourth quarter, midway through. Cardinals with the ball, looking for a big defensive play to take this thing home.
So how do I feel? I'm the same way that you are right now. I think, you and I both woke up on Wednesday being like, can we just move past whatever that was on Sunday? Like it's time. It's time. And you know what? Listen, the team said the same thing too, Adam. It was like, you can't, and I love this quote from Dayball and Wink Martindale. You can't let one bad week lose you 2 weeks. You can't do it. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's very philosophical. And I really like that. It's like, you got to get that stink out the same way where like, you can't let one win cause you one loss where you're like all high on yourself thinking that you're just going to steamroll every opponent. So for me, the team has turned the tape. I have buried the tape, all the different idiosyncrasies that you talk about with that. But I'm nervous. I told you I'm a little bit worried. I'm a little bit nervous because who would have thought after the display before Sunday Night Football, did you think that week 2 against the Cardinals was going to be like the line in the sand where your team needs to show something or else the season feels like it's already gone off the rails?
No, 100%. Yeah, we said, in the spectrum of making the playoffs and making a statement this year, that week one division rival had a bit of a must-win kind of vibe to it, and you stopped just short of really committing to it. But now, being 0-1 and coming off of that game and looking at Arizona and knowing what's just behind them on Thursday Night Football against the San Francisco 49ers, you go, well, now we are getting into must-win territory. And even before we move a little bit deeper, there's two things I want to touch on here. One, just in terms of the Giants, and yes, turning the page and moving on. The only guy who's turning the page and moving on that I did not appreciate hearing from is, of course, one Thomas McGahee. Because the idea that when he got up in front of the media and they were like, hey, what happened on that blocked field goal? He didn't even say, yeah, missed assignment or got to clean something, got to clean it up. It was just, we learned from it. We turned the page. We're moving on. And I get it. That's the mantra of the organization overall. But you had an absolute disaster on the special teams. And then they even tried to ask a different question. They asked, hey, what about from that game? Do you want to improve going into next week? And he was like, learn from it, turn the page, we moved on. And I got to tell you, man, for a guy and for a unit over the last few years that has not been a bright spot. Like, don't forget, Graham Gano making field goals, you have not accomplished anything by saying kick the football once it's set for you to get us points. That's something that happens no matter what you do, as long as you can protect in front of them. It has not been a bright spot for this team. So, like, hearing from him, and he's chuckling while he's saying it, and I get it because he's being dismissed, the media, whatever. But you don't have the cachet that a Brian Daboll does, not only as the head coach, but also as someone that's in their second year, and we feel like there's also all these good vibes around it. That one bothered me, Andrew.
I could not agree with you more. I watched that, and it was like a minute of everyone just being uncomfortable, where like he's not answering any questions, and then the media is like, okay, this is really weird. Like, let me ask this again in a different way. Maybe you'll like actually acknowledge that
There's nothing else to talk to about, by the way. Yeah, what else am I going to ask you? Do you plan on making field goals this week? Do you plan on protecting? You know what I mean? Like, you have to ask about what went wrong, like, especially when it comes to special teams.
He is the special teams coach, so you're going to ask him about special teams. It's not like they're asking him, like, what was the creative play blocking for the tight end on 3rd and 13? He's like, I don't know. Like, what are you talking about? But yeah, Adam, the thing listen, we all know what happened. They watched it internally. Thomas McGahee ripped into whomever was responsible for it. Daboll yelled and screamed probably at Thomas McGahee and was like, you need to clean this up. We cannot have that happen. He said, oh, and also when you talk to the media, here are the 7 words you're allowed to say. These are the only 7 words. I don't care how many times I ask you, you're going to take a bullet for this one. But it would have been nice if they collectively as a team, and I don't want to labor the point, but it would have been nice if they were like, listen, it was difficult. Missed assignments happen. We have cleaned all that up. You will not see that again moving forward. Give us some confidence that like you've identified what it is. It will not happen again, and you feel good moving forward. He did not give any confidence that was the case.
Yeah, and again, like the simple line of just like, on that play, a Zudu, and there's an interior, and we set that up for a particular type of protection. It could have been miscommunication. It could have been a lot of things. I mean, you could have said could have been a lot of different factors there on that play, but obviously we got in the film or whatever. And it's like it's semantics about the way you phrase it, but the presentation of his responses I was like, I don't know, man. Maybe I fire this guy right now. Like, maybe I just fire this guy, like, just to feel good about, like, hey, we understand none of this was good enough. And again, we'll get into this week, and then when you come out of it, if everything looks clean and crisp, and there's a couple of nice special teams returns, right? Then we'll take the big step back and say, hey, this is why you give a guy like Thomas McGahee a very long leash, who's been with the team for a long time at this position.
So, Adam, we talked about Thomas McGahee. We talked about special teams not looking great. Right. The last couple of years, things haven't looked good. When we talk about the biggest fear going into the Arizona Cardinals game, would you say that it's special teams? Like, what is the number one thing that's keeping you up at night about this game in Arizona on Sunday?
No, I mean, it has to still be the offensive line. Whether or not Thomas is playing, the health, and trying to make sure that he's going to be out there. I think the biggest fear would be that and we went back and you look at some of the Cardinals plays against the Commanders, where Sam Howell really is helping the Cardinals in a lot of instances get some of those sacks, right? Scrambling into the offensive line, not even when the pressure is coming, scrambling out on the edge towards the sideline and still taking a sack. So there's a lot of these instances where you think, oh, we can clean some of this up just by not being a young quarterback trying to learn as he gets underneath his NFL feet. But what if it looks as bad as it did in week 1? Right? I mean, do we have confidence? Maybe we think Evan Neal, he is going to develop. Okay, it's a little bit difficult right now. I don't have confidence that Glowinski is going to, quote, get better. I have confidence that he's getting older and maybe it's not going to ever get better. And he played with significantly better offensive linemen and more established offensive linemen when he was with the Colts. So if that's not going to improve, and if Thomas is a little bit dinged up, this could still be another game where the Giants are under a lot of pressure with consistency. And then it opens up to just, with all the bad weather from week one, did we just not get a chance to see? Remember, if you go back and you think about that first drive, there was a lot to like, and then it absolutely crumbles. And I wonder if maybe you would say it's special teams, because what broke down that first drive against Dallas was a blocked field goal attempt that, at 40-0, it doesn't feel like anything, but it felt like something in the moment. It felt like not rewarding a team that had a nice drive and felt very familiar to struggles of years past.
Yeah, it's tough to think about anything other than the offensive line, and the reason why, Adam, is because it feels like we can't see everything else that the Giants have been working on if the offensive line doesn't give the offense any amount of time to operate. We don't know how Darren Waller is going to look. Is the chemistry going to carry over from the preseason that he seemed to have had with Daniel Jones? What does the addition of Paris Campbell look like? Are they going to be able to leverage him in reverse plays and quick outs and things like that? Are we going to see Isaiah Hodgins be able to run crisp routes? We know he's not a breakaway speed guy. He needs routes to develop in order to get open. Like, there's so many things. How are we going to see any of these things happen? What this offense can look like if there isn't enough time for the offense to develop? And the big thing that I'll turn it over to you on is, then all of a sudden, if the offense is struggling because their defensive line is getting pressure, it all of a sudden immediately throws the pressure back on the defense to say, uh-oh, if we give up 7 points, now all of a sudden, like, are we going to get it back? That is the worst place for the Giants to be.
I agree with you. When we think about now, and it's interesting, right? It would be the worst place to be potentially, because it creates a negative game script where you can't allow your best players and your best weapons and what you think is maybe the strength early on in a game to now all of a sudden become a pressure point and become an area of potential weakness. What I will say is, my bullish take is that the defense is going to look dramatically better this week. And for all the reasons you're kind of highlighting there about, well, what if it goes wrong? I don't think it'll go tragically wrong offensively. I think it will be good enough. Remember, when we were heading towards halftime, almost 30 minutes through week one, the Giants had outpossessed 17, 18 minutes to 10 over the Dallas Cowboys. So the defense ended up to be out there for a long time. I'm willing to give Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari, and Leonard Williams a pass for week one. Dexter Lawrence, though, you look at the stat lines, you say maybe not necessarily. We understand what his role is supposed to be, and he got there through the line a couple of times. The overall performance from him, I thought, was pretty good. The outside edge rushers, not good enough. We know that, right? Like Kayvon Thibodeau, you are a top 5 draft pick in the NFL. You need to be a game wrecker. And if you're not being a game wrecker, it needs to be because you're getting so consistently double teamed that Azeez Ojulari is sashaying his way to the quarterback and throwing him down with ease, right? Like, the point of attack here needs to be better for the Giants, because I think the secondary showed that they can be good, showed that they can be consistent, even though they're young and inexperienced, certainly in a lot of areas. But they can get that job done if you get the pressure. And I fully expect, I'm going bullish on the idea that we are going to see a multiple sack performance out of one of those two guys on the outside, and then 3, 4 sacks in this game at a minimum. Because if not, it just means that you're not performing up to level. The flat out, you're not performing up to expectations in week number 2.
Yeah, listen, against Joshua Dobbs, I am fairly confident that that defense will obviously keep them under 20 points. If they give up more than 20 points to Joshua Dobbs, then we're in a world of hurt. My bullish take is that, knowing that Andrew Thomas might be limited, knowing that Evan Neal has struggled, knowing that Glowinski had one of the worst pass blocking grades ever in the history of Pro Football Focus, this feels like a Saquon Barkley game. This feels like the Giants are going to say, we need to run the ball. We need to run it down their throats, because the alternative is getting pressure on that passing game and potential turnovers and mistakes can happen. For me, I feel like the Giants are at their best when they're focused on Saquon Barkley running the football, using someone like Daniel Jones to do the naked bootlegs to move out, and using play action to their advantage to get those wide receivers open. So for me on offense, it feels like, to right the ship and make everyone feel a little bit better, let's start running the football the way the Giants did on that first drive against the Cowboys, where they had success.
Yeah, and I agree with it, because you set up the pass off of that, and we understand it. And setting up, by the way, opening game script as being like, hey, it's going to be Saquon. We're going to be a tone setter here, like you said, first drive, just like in week 1. I get that, but again, because of the opponent. And listen, you can't afford to mess around and get too cute and potentially lose a week 2 game. And I think there's a little bit of a razor's edge that you walk here. We're going to give you such a heavy dose of Saquon Barkley, you're not going to be able to stand it. And we're going to grind our way through, and it's going to be long drives, and you're going to be kicking yourselves. And by the way, maybe we only punch in a touchdown and 2 field goals across 3 drives instead of multiple touchdowns. And maybe you guys get a field goal here, and, you're going to get a touchdown maybe at some point. If all of a sudden we're looking into the back half of this game and it's a 1 possession or a 10-point game, that does, I don't want to live in that world. I want the Giants to be up 2 scores early in this game, feeling confident, allowing the defense to pin their ears back, right? And it is a hard balance there. But just to your point, 2 very strong methodical running drives that end in touchdowns accomplishes the same goal and takes a heap of time off the clock. So I get the premise.
Adam, we put a poll up yesterday on Twitter to ask what needs to happen on Sunday against the Cardinals for Giants to feel good, and the options.
I voted in this from my personal account, by the way.
Oh, did you? Good, yeah. Good. And we got a good response, some good volume back, and the options were just win at all costs. The offensive line looks better. Daniel Jones is elite, or the defense steps up. I was shocked at the spread in which the responses came in, whereas basically like a third of the people said just win, a third of the people basically said the offensive line needs to look better, and a third of the people said the defense needs to look dominant, and one sole person said Daniel Jones needs to look elite. And that's were you surprised by that? Like, was that interesting to you, the fact that, like, well, let me rephrase it a better way for you. Is this all about just winning against the Cardinals, or are you giving the Giants style points in this game on how they win if they end up getting a W?
Well, Andrew, I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain. When I voted on this from my personal account, head over to Twitter and follow One Giant Podcast, obviously, so you can vote on these, and also be doing them on the YouTube community as well. I went with dominant defense in this vote, because and again, when you're splitting the hairs of, so wait, you'd rather the defense look dominant but lose the game? Like, that's what you're saying in the hierarchy of what you... No. But I think, because I'm already saying the idea of just win, baby, sorry, that's a foregone conclusion. If they don't win the game, it doesn't, nothing else is going to matter. And that should then be the hierarchy. Just win. I don't care how. It could be an ugly, dirty game. But the Cardinals are a team that are actively trying to lose this year. They are tanking for a quarterback, right? They are going for Caleb in next year's draft. You cannot be a team that has to just win against that. When you talk about playing maybe, say, the Green Bay Packers further down the season, right? When you talk about a game against the Commanders where you feel like, hey, they should be behind us in the divisional hierarchy, we think we're better than them in totality, you just win, because that's a divisional game, and I don't care how you get there. When you play against a bad team like Arizona that's selling off their best players in the offseason for pennies on the dollar, I need you to look dominant in some area. And while the offensive line, I may want to point to that, again, I know there's certain issues that are not going to get solved. And we have to wait to see what that's going to be. The defense has the players. They have the talent. The Arizona Cardinals do not have the players. They do not have the talent. You need to be able to lock it down. And we can talk about how, Connor should be one of the focal points, right? Shut him down first and then tell Dobbs, why don't you go ahead and really start dropping back and trying to find your receivers and let these route combinations develop. That's why I said dominant defensive performance, because that tells me that week 1 was an aberration in a very specific area that cannot be a trend. That had to be a blip. It cannot be a trend beyond week 2.
So everyone is saying that the Arizona Cardinals are tanking, but someone forgot to tell the Arizona Cardinal players that they're tanking. And that's the challenge, right?
That's fine, but I'll let you go. That's fine, but they may not know it, but the organization knows it, and the organization has taken away a lot of the talent, right?
Well, yes, but even taking away that talent, new coach wants to impress, wants to show up. Obviously, a defensive-minded coach. For sure. They outrushed. The Arizona Cardinals outrushed the Washington Commanders, who have Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson. The Arizona Cardinals were up going into the fourth quarter on the road against the Washington Commanders. And,
says more about the Commanders to me.
Team is more. I think the Cardinals are more competitive than people are giving them credit for.
Yeah.
They try not to beat themselves, is what they're trying to stay within, saying, we know we have Joshua Dobbs. We're going to try to run the football. We're going to try to play good defense, bend, don't break, and let's see where the chips fall at that point. And so for
Yep.
me, and we mentioned this earlier this week on the show. This does feel a little bit like a lose-lose for the Giants in terms of the community of Giants fans and social media, where it's like, if you lose to the Cardinals, the talk track is the season's over. They're tanking. You can't even beat them. They don't even have a starting quarterback. If you
Yep.
win, then everyone says, well, it's the Arizona Cardinals. They're tanking. They don't have a quarterback. It doesn't really matter. And so for me, like obviously, I'd like to see the offensive line play better. Obviously, I'd like to see the defense show up. But like, I just want to walk out of Arizona with a W and be 1-1 and figure out where we move from there, because nothing else matters. Like, if the Giants score 40 points and they win 40-10, sure, you'd feel a little bit better about yourself. But like, if they win 20-17 and we walk out 1-1, it's still the same on the scoreboard, the same way it would be if we lost 38-10 to the Cowboys.
Yeah, well, and by the way, right, like it's, for everything that happened in week 1, it's only one loss. It doesn't count for 3 losses, right? And the same way, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, 4 or 5 weeks from now, when you look back, if the Giants are a 500 team, you'll say, well, they beat the Cardinals. So how did we get to 500? We got to win against the Cardinals regardless. So I do agree with you in terms of the methodology. And one thing that I'll point out, just to talking about Arizona being more competitive than people maybe perceive. And it is interesting because I think that, sometimes that idea, a team can go, the Houston Texans last year were a great example of this, right? They lost a ton of games, but they were also in a ton of games, right? And ultimately, the lack of talent is what stopped them from winning more one-possession games or not. But when you go back and think about, as you mentioned, how the Cardinals outrushed the Commanders in week 1, it's a reminder here that in that very sloppy week 1 game, the Giants defense, which did not have to be nearly as worried about Dak Prescott in the passing game, it was 4.1 yards per carry overall for the rushing attack for Dallas. It was 5 yards per carry, 12 for 70 for Tony Pollard. Like, and if you think that the Cardinals, as this team with James Conner, who went 14 for 62, it wasn't anything sexy, but he grinded his way there. They used Marquise Brown for one really explosive 29-yard play, which can skew those numbers a little bit. But it's there, right? The talent in the backfield is there. And that was arguably, talk about the biggest fear. Offensive line had to lead the table. But my other fear goes in line with my bullish take about the defense and saying, like, somehow you still got a little bit carved up by the running attack in a game that seems so destined to be driven by the ground game. So these are real things you have to pay attention to, and we will see how they unfold when it comes to Sunday. Let's turn our attention then, Andy, to our predictions, to our betting lines, to some of the fantasy notes as we turn into here, because I have a little bit of a nice little surprise to throw in here for the New York Football Giants as we approach game day on Sunday, 4:05. This will be basically a West Coast kind of game. The Giants are obviously at Arizona. They are laying 4.5 points. That makes it like a touchdown game on neutral site here. Where do you stand currently? And remind us, because you've done a good job tracking where the line started and where it's been progressing.
Yeah, so this has been interesting. The line opened up, the Giants on the road, giving 4 points to the Arizona Cardinals. It moved up right away, up to 6. The Giants giving 6 points. Everyone thinking like, oh, this is a misnomer. Arizona stinks. Let's see what's going on. Since then, Andrew Thomas's availability has been called into question. They're trying to figure out who's going to play for the Giants. Obviously, Darren Waller has a little bit of a nerve issue. The line has moved back down to 4.5. And as we get closer, teams are saying, well, it seems like Arizona is more competitive than we thought. And so, Adam, the line
and the
started
Giants
at 4.
might suck way more than we thought, right?
Right. Well, yes, exactly. So there's a lot of push and pull going on there.
Yeah.
What are your initial thoughts hearing it started at 4, went up to 6, back down to 4.5? It feels like the pendulum has been swinging quite a bit in this game.
I find it weird that because the line gets set after the week 1 games. So it's weird that why? You saw the Cardinals against the Commanders. You saw the Giants. That was on Sunday night. You had the sample size first and foremost there, right? So you get that sample, and then you go 6. No, we'll bring it down a little bit. I think what really ultimately it might speak to is what you talk about game script, that it's viewed as from a Vegas perspective that the Giants are going to try to grind their way there. So rather than setting this bar where you're maybe laying a bit more points because you could be airing it out and it could get out of hand quickly, that they look at this as being a relatively close game, at least midway through the fourth quarter, where it's going to be the pendulum swing on a key turnover from the Cardinals or on a touchdown versus field goal for the Giants.
Yeah, I completely appreciate that. And I'm with you on that. It feels like it's going to be a relatively low scoring game because, one, keep in mind, the Arizona Cardinals did not score an offensive touchdown in the game against the Washington Commanders. Their only
Again, right.
touchdown that they scored was a Sam Howell holding on to the ball too long, sack fumble, guy picks it up and runs into the end zone, right? So
again, that's why I think the Cardinals suck. But
yes, but still, they were competitive and were winning the game in the fourth quarter. So maybe they were like, hey, let's hold on to the lead as long as we can. We're not going to risk things. Who knows if the game script would have changed things? But so, you understand, and that actually kind of bleeds into the over under of 40 points, which has actually stayed relatively steady. Now it's moved down to 39.5, but it hasn't really moved too much. So to your point, they think it's going to be a low scoring game. And when you think it is going to be a low scoring game, obviously that means the variation between what the teams can score is obviously going to be a little bit tighter than maybe what other people think.
Yeah, highly unlikely that on the 39.5 over under, they're saying it's going to be, 28-10 New York Giants. I don't think that's the way that they're perceiving it. More likely, as I said at the top of the show, kind of, 23 points maybe for the Giants, something in that range before we get into official predictions, 23-17, living in that type of range. And it could be coming down to who has the ball late, what is needed late, and you end up getting some of those backdoor covers with the over under, not unlike Thursday Night Football, which we will close out on here when we end our show. So before we give our key predictions, then we know it's -4.5. We know the over-under is 39.5. But when we talk about some of those little plays, fantasy or line-wise, give me your one, Andy. And we need to make sure, because Andrew was actually quite successful at this over the course of last season, both with the Giants and the NFL overall. So you should be paying attention when he gives you his takes around a fantasy or betting play here. I think let's just go with betting, because that's really been your wheelhouse. What would be a couple of your key bets to throw a couple of shekels down on?
Well, this is a tough one.
Oh, no, he's not confident.
Because when there's not a lot of scoring that you expect to happen in the game, you don't really think that there's going to be explosive offenses happening. What I will say is my favorite bet of the entire game is the Arizona Cardinals team total under. I think that it's right now at 17.5. I don't see the Arizona Cardinals scoring 2 touchdowns against the Giants. The only way that happens is if the offense turns the ball over multiple times in Giants territory to give them short fields. I would be shocked if Joshua Dobbs and a banged up, James Conner are able to manufacture 2 touchdown scoring drives against the Giants. So for me, that's my favorite bet. Do you have one, Adam, that you're thinking about?
Well, so it's interesting. As I've told you consistently, I do want to be somebody that does not come in, doesn't get out of hand here, and doesn't go completely off the rails. What I did want to find, I'm very curious about reception over unders for a guy like Paris Campbell, who came out of that week 1 showing a little bit of frustration. We didn't get a real sample size on anybody catching the ball, but I'm going to give you one here. And then we're going to dovetail after our predictions back into Thursday Night Football, and it'll all tie together in your minds. And I'll even reference week 1 at that point. Jalen Hyatt, anytime touchdown scorer, is right now sitting there at a plus 650. I like that number. I know that he only got on the field really in limited action. The rating wasn't good for him. A little pass behind him, he drops that ball. But when you think about what's worked, and I'll say it right now. Go back and watch the Dolphins in week 1, right? Go and watch the Eagles on Thursday Night Football. Hill, Smith, blowing the top off the defenses. We know that this is critical, not only in the NFL, but critical for the New York Football Giants. And while Darius Slayton has speed, he does not have that ease ability to get off the line and get away from coverage when you need to create that separation initially. I just think that Kafka and the Giants know how important over the course of the entire season Jalen Hyatt can be. And we saw this in camp. We saw this in preseason with Tyrod Taylor. Badly underthrown ball. He was so far away and ahead separated that he was able to slow down, take a nap, have a picnic, and then catch a touchdown pass. I would take a look at the anytime touchdown for Jalen Hyatt, and I actually would prefer it. I even like it more in the first half as a surprise when you get yourself your opportunity. Maybe you're already up 7-0, second possession, you go for one of those bombs, you break one out.
Adam, why don't you just go for the whole thing and say
Okay.
Jalen Hyatt first touchdown score? That would feel like right
Now,
out
what
of
are
the
we
gate.
talk to me about odds? Hit me with the odds, baby.
Plus 2,500, 25 to 1. If you're really feeling it, Adam, it
Come
feels
on.
like that. If anyone follows OGP, they know that this is just an Adam special. The long
It is a
shot missile. That if it happens, we would all be super excited, and Adam would win a couple of beers at the bar, basically for it. Adam, listen,
you know what? I don't like it. I love it. I love
yeah.
it, guys. Guess what?
The
Watch
second I
this,
saw
guys.
it, I knew. The second I saw
You
it, I knew.
thought
I
that I
said,
was going to keep myself in check all season long. Joke's on you, baby. First touchdown scorer, Jalen Hyatt. Throw the money. And by the way, though, and play it smart. I'm not, it's not just a pretty face here. Go ahead, put the $5 on the first touchdown. Then you go $10 on first half touchdown, and then you go 20 on anytime touchdown. You tear yourselves out, and then you just start hitting them all throughout the game. The glory rides. One touchdown to start the game, and you're just sitting there you're luxuriating in the money that you're pulling in.
Disclaimer: Adam is not a professional gambler. Do not seek betting advice from Adam Armbrecht. Just wanted to clear that up. Make sure.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Please bet responsibly. Thank you, please.
That being
Adam,
the case
listen,
for you guys.
I like where your head is at. It would be great to see. I don't see the game script going that way. I really think this is going to be the Giants trying to grind out a win and just get out of Arizona with a W. So I don't know how many over the top shots they're going to take. I'd be excited if it happens, of course. But my game script, I think, is going to be a little different than yours. Do you want to get into what your prediction is going to be for the game?
Yeah, so I said it earlier. I mean, listen, you're hearing, I have my fears, I have my concerns. But if the New York Football Giants, even if the Cardinals are a more competitive team than people realize coming into the year, if the Giants are worth anything this season, they have to get these kinds of wins, right? We know that you're going to end up going and playing the San Francisco 49ers on a short week coming up on Thursday. We know that you have a Green Bay Packers team later in the season that's going to be different than expectations maybe coming into the year, even though I told you I was a little more bullish on them. The Dolphins are coming up on the road. The Bills are coming up on the road. The Jets, that looks different. Okay, but there's a handful of games we talked about at the start of the year that just have to be wins. They have to be wins if you want a chance to be making the playoffs. This is one of them. So they need to knock away the bad taste, get a big victory here. And while I do believe there are opportunities for some big play scoring, I understand, appreciate, and value that the best player on this team is still Saquon Barkley, and he still needs to be the feature and the engine. I'm taking the Giants, obviously. I'd be happy to lay the points if we're talking about from a betting line. And if we're talking about official game score, I'm going to go ahead and put this one down as 26-14 New York Football Giants. And I actually, you know what? 26-13. I don't think that Arizona gets into the end zone 2 times, but I will give them 3 scores in the game.
That is fair. I understand where you're at. You think that the offense is going to look a little bit more explosive. I don't mind that, Adam, because when you think about it, the 2 people that are on the outside for the Arizona Cardinals are Zaven Collins and LJ Collier. Keep in mind, they have 5 combined sacks in their entire career in the NFL. They are not pin their ears back Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. And that's why the Giants should feel confident. They should feel like they can be able to move the ball effectively. I, on the other hand, have the game script a little bit different. I think it's going to be methodical. I think the Giants showed in the preseason they want to have long, sustained drives. 7 plays, 8 plays, 10 plays, move the ball down the field using Saquon's legs, Daniel Jones' legs, Darren Waller over the middle. So for me, I don't see this being as high of a scoring game as you do. I also don't think that the Cardinals offense is very good at all. And so for me, that kind of clouds my mind a little bit. While they outrushed the Washington Commanders, they didn't even get to 100 yards rushing. Joshua Dobbs for like 125, 130 yards. They really didn't do anything on offense that was that special. So for me, I look at it as 2 methodical drives for the Giants, get them in the end zone. I think Gano gets right here, gets a couple of field goals. I do not believe in.
He's still ailing a bit, by the way. He's still ailing he has a little bit of an injury here.
Yes, but he's fine. I have all the faith in him. No worries there. I like you said, bullish take about the defense. I don't think the defense gives up a touchdown in this game against the Arizona Cardinals. My prediction is the New York Giants win 20-9 in a low-scoring game where the Giants get ahead a little bit and don't have to air it out, don't have to take the top off, and they sit back and say, Joshua Dobbs, good luck throwing it over us because we don't think you can do it.
Yeah, 3 scores is a lot, by the way. And I was going to go and be like, oh, let me amend this thing in a big way. And 9 was going to be because it's 3 field goals. That feels comfortable. I won't do that. I'll amend it to 24-13 just because the game script that you look at is I'll give the Giants 17 points in that one big play, right? The one explosive play that gets you to 24, just because that balance of game script, you may not have enough possessions to, get 4 field goals, 5 field goals, also a touchdown or 2. That's asking a lot just from a time standpoint. So, okay. Officially then 20-9 for Andrew Makowitz, 24-13 for yours truly. Really like where we're at here. Think we're going to get on track with our Giants picks. And at the end of the day, Andy, one thing that we want to close out here, and we normally don't do it like this, but you made a really good point coming out of the Thursday night game, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Minnesota Vikings, 2 teams that were in the playoffs last year. Obviously, the Giants beat the Vikings. Obviously, Philly went to the Super Bowl. What was your perspective to remind everybody about as we tap into week number 2 here and the relative?
So the thing that I was noticing, Adam, and try to keep this in mind, is all these teams are rusty. On a short week, you were looking at one playoff team that won, I think, 13 games, another playoff team that went to the Super Bowl, right? And the first quarter and the first 20 minutes of the game, they both looked lost. There was turnovers all over the place. It felt like Jalen Hurts was out of sync, didn't understand where his receivers were going to be. Bad interceptions. It did not look good. And the thing to think about is these teams are still trying to get up to speed. The Giants, at the end of the day, the Giants have to go into Arizona and get a win. They also turn around next Thursday and have to play the San Francisco 49ers on a short week as well. It just goes to show, no matter how good some of these teams are, obviously Dallas looked good against the Giants and some other teams did, the Eagles are still trying to get their footing. Teams are still getting their footing, and you're looking at 2 playoff teams that were doing that. So that's why we kind of take Sunday with a grain of salt. Hope the Giants can come back in, get this W, dominant defensive performance, and hey, I'm rooting for your Jalen Hyatt first touchdown the whole entire time.
Listen, I mean, it's nice when you have some rust and you have Jalen Hurts, who only has a 44.6 QBR, but 4 touchdowns for 131 yards and a touchdown for Devonta Smith. It really helps put a little bit of a salve over that, right? Swift running for 175 rushing yards, and that's what you want to see. Even if it is rust, even if there are things to grow here, you want to see a team just start to confirm what they are. And that's what we got on Thursday night, by the way. Got confirmation that Philly's going to keep building and get better, and that's a hard pill to swallow for Giants fans. And Minnesota, for all of their success that they can have offensively, the defense is going to plague them all year long. 364 yards and an 83 QBR for Kirk Cousins in that game. 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He got back on form, and it still didn't matter. Those are just exciting narratives to watch from a league-wide standpoint. And obviously for the Giants, let's get back on track. Let's just get a good foot forward here, and that just means basically having any stats at all on the offensive side of the ball. We will be back in, obviously, breaking this one down on Monday following the game. May even sneak in. We're not sure. We like to play this fast and loose on the weekends. Maybe a little Sunday morning. We'll check in. We'll see if the line is shifted as well. Go back and check out our Pick'em Battle. That's a bonus episode over on YouTube right now. Until next time, though, friends, until game day, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.